welcome to Telesur. I'm Carla Gonzalez in Quito, and this is from the South. Venezuela has diagnosed 77 positive cases of COVID-19 to date, all of which have been imported from Europe, Colombia, and the United States. And this is what President Nicolás Maduro said about it on Sunday.
The Venezuelan state, along with our scientific system and the national hygiene system, has followed up on the cases, and I'm informing today that Venezuela has 77 confirmed cases. Each and every one of them are imported cases.
Meanwhile, the Minister of Communication, Jorge Rodriguez, denounced a publication by the Washington Post, which portrayed Venezuela as vulnerable to a greater spread of the coronavirus. Rodriguez said from the positive cases in the country, 2 are in critical condition and 15 have recovered. And the capital, Caracas, saw a second night of disinfection of public spaces. This is part of a contingency plan to stop the COVID-19. Police, security, and civil protection forces are supporting these efforts, carried out mainly in busy sites of the city, including markets and medical centers, which continue to see a flow of people despite the quarantine. The authorities plan to undertake frequent disinfection, but are also calling on the population to continue to observe individual and collective preventive measures. Cuban health authorities have now reported a total of 25 confirmed COVID-19 cases. The Ministry of Public Health also reported that 716 people are isolated and under observation as possible cases, of which 205 are foreign nationals and 511 are Cubans. Of the 25 confirmed cases, 2 patients are in critical condition and being cared for by specialists. So far, the country has recorded 1 COVID-19 death of an Italian tourist. Chilean health authorities reported the country's first COVID-19 death this Saturday, while the number of cases increased to 537. Health Minister Jaime Mañalich reported the death of an 82-year-old Chilean woman who had several underlying health conditions. The victim was a resident of the metropolitan region, which accounts for 67% of the confirmed cases in the country. Meanwhile, the Chilean government advised people to stay indoors, but no official quarantine measures have been announced.
Pongo un ejemplo.
This is a very fluid situation because we are talking about a particle that is only seen through an electronic microscope, whose behavior cannot be predicted. What happens if this virus mutates into a more benign form and the only thing it causes is a common cold like most of the old coronaviruses? Because this is a new coronavirus. What happens if the virus mutates into a quote-unquote good person? And excuse me for putting it this way, it will be a whole different scenario.
Muta una forma más benigna.
And citizens in several regions of Chile mobilized this Saturday to demand that the government of Sebastián Piñera act strongly against the virus. Protesters blocked roads to prevent residents of the capital from traveling to resorts and other towns for recreational purposes. The government has refused to decree a mandatory quarantine, citing a negative economic impact. Santiago de Chile has seen the largest number of confirmed cases in the country, with 359 of the total, the 537 that were reported by health authorities.
What we're doing is demanding that the government put health barriers at the entrance of Los Andes province and also in the province of San Felipe. Over the last couple of days, only 2 points have been set up throughout Chile, and Aconcagua is one of the most strategic access points both for foreigners entering the land border as well as for the influx of vehicles from Santiago to Los Andes. So we're asking the state to set up a preventive health barrier. We still do not have today any cases of contagion in the Aconcagua region.
The president of El Salvador, Nayib Bukele, has announced that all utility bills will be suspended for 3 months, among other relief measures to mitigate the economic impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. These, even though the country reports only 3 cases so far.
We have suspended for 3 months electricity bills, water bills, telephone bills, internet bills, cable TV bills, rent payments, bank payments, credit cards payments, mortgage payments, so there are no more payments for 3 months. 1.5 million households, 75% of a population, will receive a transfer of $300. It is a little more than a minimum wage, because they won't pay taxes on it, and because they won't have to pay for transport to go to work.
Bolivia's electoral authority announced the suspension of the electoral calendar for 14 days as a response to COVID-19 and proposes a dialogue for the possible modification of the date of the general elections, which are currently scheduled for May 3rd.
The Supreme Electoral Authority has taken notice of the decision by the government to declare a quarantine with restriction of activities during a period of 14 days beginning tomorrow. Before this situation, the Supreme Electoral Court has decided first, and as it is an exceptional circumstance, to suspend the calendar and schedule for a period of 14 days beginning at midnight this Sunday, March 22nd. In second place, we reiterate our will to pursue a broad and plural dialogue with all political organizations participating in the 2020 process, as well as all other powers of the state, so that marked by unity of Bolivians, a new date for voting of the 2020 general election can be defined.
Also in Bolivia, social sectors affiliated with the Movement Towards Socialism Party denounced that the right wing will use the COVID-19 pandemic to postpone the date of the elections and allow the de facto government to hold on to power.
Bolivia's Unity Pact, a group of social organizations affiliated with the Movement Towards Socialism, have rejected the possibility of postponing the national elections under the de facto government's exceptional measures amid the coronavirus.
We reject the postponement of the national elections, which must be held on May the 3rd. The national elections were called through the law by the executive power, and the Supreme Electoral Court must respect that.
The Unity Pact is made up of the most important social organizations of the country, which are affiliated with the Movement Towards Socialism, whose candidates in recent polls have nearly twice the support of the other candidates in the electoral race.
We live in uncertainty. This uncertainty has to end on May 3rd, and a government must take power, one which is legitimately and democratically elected, and to work for all the Bolivians living in this country.
Elections might be suspended. We are not going to allow that. We will not accept that, because we only accept a government which is legally elected, a constitutional government, which is responsible for the problems we are seeing today.
The concern of the social organizations is the purging of voters by the Supreme Electoral Court, which they claim mainly affects the rural area, where there is no possibility to file a complaint.
The departmental executive are anticipating how many colleagues we have, because we have to have a precise number. According to reports, we are reaching 170,000. So that is a concern for the Unit Pact. It's an emergency for the Unit Pact. They cannot be paid, especially in the rural areas.
National elections were called for May 3rd as part of a political agreement to pacify the country after the coup d'etat in November last year. 8 candidates are running. 7 represent the right-wing sectors which overthrew the movement to socialism.
Coming up, Germany's chancellor has gone into self-quarantine fearing a coronavirus infection. More details after the break. Welcome back. More news now. The World Health Organization has condemned attempts by some world leaders to use the coronavirus to stigmatize certain countries.
viruses know no borders, and they don't care your ethnicity, the color of your skin, or how much money you have in the bank. So it's really important that we be careful in the language we use, lest it lead to profiling of individuals associated with the virus. This is just something we need to all avoid.
Indian citizens have applauded health practitioners for working tirelessly to give care to COVID-19 patients. In a nationwide campaign to honor health workers, families banged pots and pans, clapped hands and sang from their balconies. The majority of citizens have complied with a government-imposed curfew to help stop the spread of the virus. The country has so far recorded 348 cases and 7 deaths.
Yeah, actually our Prime Minister had given us a request telling that all of us had to come forward and clap for 5 minutes to show our gratitude and also our appreciation to the medical community and to the others who have worked so tirelessly and so selflessly from the past few weeks, maybe, for this terrible trying things that are happening in our country.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel has gone into self-quarantine after learning that a doctor whom she met had tested positive for the coronavirus. But before going into quarantine, Merkel announced a new set of measures to combat the spread of the virus, including a ban on gatherings of more than 2 people and a mandatory closure of restaurants, hairdressers, massage parlors, and other non-essential stores. There are now about 1,200 confirmed cases of COVID-19 across the African continent, and the number of people who have died due to the pandemic stands at 37. A number of African countries have continued imposing measures against the spread of the pandemic, and new cases have been recorded in Uganda, Eritrea, Angola, and Madagascar, with Mozambique being the latest to confirm a case. And on Sunday, Rwanda became the first country in sub-Saharan Africa to order a total shutdown due to the coronavirus, after the number of confirmed cases rose to 17. All unnecessary movements outside the home have been banned for an initial 2 weeks, except for essential services such as healthcare and shopping for groceries. Both public and private workers have also been ordered to work from home. Borders have been completely closed, except for goods and cargo, and returning citizens who will be subjected to a 14-day quarantine. In Nigeria, churches have heeded calls by the government to take measures to stop the spread of the COVID-19. Churches in the West African country are usually packed with thousands of people. However, since the government announced measures to curb the virus, the number of people attending religious events has drastically reduced. The churches are also implementing control measures, which include using hand sanitizers and conducting temperature tests. Nigeria has confirmed 22 cases so far.
In fact, today, you would have seen more than 200 women in the church. You understand? You would have seen more than 200 women, but there are two. Only few. Only 3 you can see there in their uniform. Today, they are there. But because of life, we told them to stay back.
Italy's death toll from the COVID-19 rose past 5,000 on Sunday after authorities reported 651 deaths. The latest daily toll was smaller than Saturday's record of 793 fatalities, but still the second highest registered during the month-long crisis. The death toll now stands at 5,476, while the number of confirmed cases has risen to 59,138.
Unfortunately, today again, we registered death of 651 people. A very simple comment on the figure, and then I'll give the floor to Professor Locatelli. Today's numbers are lower than the numbers we gave yesterday. I hope and we all hope that these numbers can be confirmed in the coming days.
On Saturday evening, Italian Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte ordered a nationwide closure of all companies and factories that are not involved in the production of essential goods and services.
Today, we decided to take another step. The decision taken by the government is to close all productive activity throughout the territory that is not strictly necessary, crucial, indispensable to guarantee us essential goods and services.
A Cuban medical brigade has arrived in Italy to contribute to the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. The 52 doctors and nurses arrived in the northern Italian region of Lombardy, the worst affected. This is the 6th Cuban medical brigade to travel abroad to fight the pandemic and the first to provide its services in Europe. Health authorities in Italy said the team has optimum training and experience in combating epidemics. The medical brigade will reinforce the efforts of a Chinese health team already working in the country. And on Sunday, Russia deployed 9 military planes to Italy carrying 100 medical experts and equipment to fight the virus. The Ministry of Defense said the aid mission was agreed by Russian President Vladimir Putin and the Italian Prime Minister. It added that experts have experience in dealing with pandemics, as they have previously taken part in fighting Ebola, African swine fever, and anthrax outbreaks. China says it will step up measures to reduce the number of imported COVID-19 cases. On Sunday, the National Health Commission reported 45 imported cases and only 1 locally transmitted case. The Commission has said that all arriving international passengers will undergo a test to screen for coronavirus, expanding a program that previously only applied to those coming from heavily hit countries.
On March 21, 45 new confirmed cases imported from abroad were reported, including 14 in Shanghai, 13 in Beijing, 7 in Huadong, 4 in Fujian, 2 in Gansu, and 1 in Hebei, Jiangxing, Jiangxi, Shandong, and Sichuan, respectively. By 24:00 on March 21, 314 imported cases have been reported. On March 21, the Chinese mainland reported 1 new indigenous confirmed case in Huangdong, which is related to an imported case.
After this break, we'll look at the latest call for a ceasefire in Libya, now as it may face a health emergency. Don't go away. Thank you for joining us again. Let's continue. South Sudan has plunged into a civil war since 2013, and attempts to form a coalition government and reach peace have failed. We bring you more on the humanitarian impact of this conflict.
Koban Gacho is a lucky man. Shot 3 times and left for dead, he was found alive following the carnage, the bullets having missed his vital organs and airlifted to Juba for surgery.
I was shot in the shoulder and placed out. When I woke up, I had been shot in the thigh and 10 later in the leg. 3 members of our team died and 6 had serious injuries.
Kuba was airlifted from the eastern state of Jonglei to this military hospital, which has a special ward run by the International Committee of the Red Cross. It is one of the few in South Sudan equipped to treat gunshot injuries. After months of talks, President Salva Kiir formed another unity government with his rival Riek Machar in February. Almost 400,000 people were killed in the struggle for power. But as the war wound down last year, the number of gunshot patients spiked by almost 20% in international Red Cross clinics across South Sudan.
The injury on the chest, it might go into the lungs, it might cause bleeding into the lungs, and if it's on the left side, it might even hurt the heart, and they might die instantly. But most of our patients, thanks God, they are lucky and they survive these injuries.
In 2019, the International Committee of the Red Cross actually treated more patients with serious gunshot wounds than in 2018, 769 compared to 658. The fear is that 2020 could follow the same path, especially so in South Sudan, where healthcare is non-existent in remote areas, and there are about 180 doctors for a population of 12 million.
Vast majority of the patients that we treat here are patients who've suffered gunshot wounds, and they're either involved with the ongoing conflict or just with general violence that exists, particularly in the cattle community. And the most recent influx of patients we've had have been involved with a raid on a cattle camp in the middle of the country.
But this is not the only problem facing the people of South Sudan. In a country of 14 million people, 2.2 million children do not go to school. The adult literacy rate is 26.8%. And in addition to the challenges in access to health and education, it is one of the places where the youngest children are abducted and recruited by armed groups. An estimated 16,000 children have been recruited by groups and armed forces since the crisis began in December 2013. Within the country, almost 2 million people are internally displaced, while there are 2 million South Sudanese refugees in the countries such as Ethiopia, Sudan, and Uganda. Meanwhile, levels of inter-community violence still pose a threat to stability in the country. A lucky few of those gunned down, like Ngasho, are airlifted to Juba. The rest take their chances at local clinics or simply bleed out in the field. Meanwhile, the clashes show little sign of ending. Political peace may have come to South Sudan, but the path to peace between its communities is still long.
More news now. One person has been killed and several others injured in Guinea during clashes between security forces and demonstrators who protested against a controversial constitutional referendum held on Sunday. President Alpha Conde is proposing a change to the constitution, allegedly to improve gender equality and introduce other social reforms. His opponents fear the real motive is to remove presidential term limits in order for him to run for a third term later this year. An earthquake rattled Croatia's capital Zagreb on Sunday morning, killing at least one person and causing widespread damage to buildings. The U.S. Geological Service said the earthquake had a magnitude 5.4. The tremor, which had its epicenter 7 kilometers north of Zagreb, occurred at 7 a.m. local time. People fled apartments and took to the streets, while parts of the capital experienced electricity cuts. A church bell tower was damaged and some buildings collapsed. The United Nations and 9 countries called on Libya's warring parties to cease hostilities to allow health authorities to tackle the novel coronavirus. In a joint statement, the ambassadors of Algeria, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, the UK and the United States, as well as the European Union delegation to Libya and the governments of Tunisia and the United Arab Emirates, all call for a humanitarian ceasefire. This will allow local authorities to respond to the public health challenge. To date, no cases of COVID-19 have been reported in the country, but experts fear an outbreak could be catastrophic due to the country's limited health system. On Friday, Chilean security forces violently dispersed demonstrators who had taken to the streets to protest against President Sebastián Piñera. Police used tear gas and water cannon against the demonstrators who have vowed to continue until Piñera steps down. More than 30 people have died at the hands of police officers since the protests broke out in October last year. The demonstrations were triggered by a hike in metro transport fares and quickly turned into a movement against inequality and other social issues.
The people of Chile are already awake. I ask my countrymen to not go to sleep because we no longer have to believe them. The coronavirus may kill us, but not as much as them. If the coronavirus does not kill us, they will starve us.
And for our last story today, South Africa marked the 60th anniversary of the Sharpeville massacre. On March 21, 1960, police officers opened fire on a group of unarmed black protesters in the township of Sharpeville on the outskirts of Johannesburg. They killed 69 and wounded 186. The group was protesting against the so-called past laws that restricted the movement of black people. The incident became a turning point in the struggle against apartheid as the African National Congress abandoned non-violent protests and launched an armed struggle against the apartheid government. And with that, we end our news brief. But you can find these and many other stories by checking our website, telesurenglish.net. Thank you for joining us. For Telesur English, I'm Carla Gonzalez. Until next time.
Innovation, science, the technological breakthrough, and its influence in society.